as content creators, most of us go down this career path because we love creating things. We love being creative. Most of us aren't necessarily passionate about knowing all of the rules, regulations, and logistics around being a business owner, especially when it comes to the legal side of things. It can feel really overwhelming. You're like, wait, what is an LLC actually? And do I need to copyright my content? Should I have a trademark for my brand? And am I actually allowed to use this music, GIF, clip from a movie in my content? There are so many questions that come up when it comes to the legal side of making money off of your content online, which is why today I'm really excited to be bringing on an expert to answer all of those questions for us. It's pretty rare that I do an interview here on the Creator Club podcast, so you know this one's going to be good. Today I'm interviewing Maggie Fisher of The Artist's Lawyer. The Artist's Lawyer is a resource for creatives to build their business on a strong legal foundation. With over 10 years of experience as an entrepreneur and a photographer, Maggie saw the need for creatives to have legal support that isn't overwhelming or confusing. So the Artist's Lawyer provides contract templates and other tools and resources to help ensure that your creative business has all the correct legal support in place, so that you can feel confident in your business and not be constantly asking yourself all of the questions that I was mentioning before. So whether you're ready to finally get a legit brand deal contract that you can use again and again, or maybe a template for a trade for product agreement, the Artist's Lawyer has these available for you in their template shop. So I personally met Maggie last year at a Sony event where she was sharing a session about some of this legal advice for content creators, which I found super helpful and super informative because it's an area where I myself feel a little bit overwhelmed sometimes. And listening to all of her advice and expertise, I knew it would be so helpful to share with all of you. So if you've ever been confused about whether or not you should start an LLC, if you should trademark your brand, or how all this copyright stuff works, don't worry, we've got you covered. Today, I'm excited to sit down with Maggie Fisher of The Artist's Lawyer to answer all of your burning legal questions. But first, I have to say a big thank you to the sponsor of the Creator Club podcast, Dash Hudson. Y'all know by now, Dash Hudson is my absolute favorite platform for checking in on my social media metrics. Their aesthetic, customizable dashboards makes it so easy to see the stats that are most important to you. Whether you're checking in on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Pinterest, you can see all of your social metrics from across platforms all in one place. Not only does Dash Hudson help you analyze your metrics from your past content, but with their Vision AI tool, you can actually predict the performance of your future content. It's kind of magic. All you have to do is upload, say, a reel that you're thinking about posting, and Vision AI will give you a prediction based on the performance of your past content, how well that particular reel will do. This is a game changer when it comes to planning your content strategy because you can have much more confidence in what you're posting and knowing that it's actually helping you work towards your goals. So if you want to see the power of Vision AI for yourself and you want to try out Dash Hudson in general, you can actually get a 14-day free trial if you go to dashhudson.com/creatorclub. And once again, thank you to Dash Hudson for making the Creator Club podcast possible. Welcome to the Creator Club. Hi, Maggie. Welcome to the Creator Club podcast. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So before we get into all of the awesome questions that the listeners sent in about the legal side of being a content creator, I would just love to hear more about your backstory because honestly, I'm so impressed with how you balance everything. You're a photographer, entrepreneur, lawyer, and mom to an adorable little girl. So I would just love to hear like how you got to where you are now. How do you do it all? And what kind of like inspired you to follow all these different paths?
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely, I get that a lot. A lot of people are very confused when I tell them that I'm both a photographer and a lawyer. I always wanted to be a lawyer growing up. I grew up in my mom's courtroom. She was a judge, and I would hide under her robe and like play with her gavel, like when I was in middle school. And that was always like the trajectory that I was on. So I did mock trial. Like I was one of those weird mock trial kids in high school. I studied political science as a major in college. college, and I finished early, and I actually went to Equatorial Guinea in Africa and worked for the United Nations Development Program. And so I always had this like political, philanthropic side to me. But at the same time, I just kind of fell into photography. So I actually grew up in Ocean City, New Jersey, which is a small surf town. So I kind of just like fell into surf photography and portraits, which quickly like just snowballed very organically. I started to travel with some of like the biggest female surfers that were on tour at the time. And so I was shooting for like Billabong and Surfing Magazine and traveling with like some of like the top 10 female surfers in the world. And at the time there was a lot of content. There still is a ton of content creation on that side of things. So I was working with them and like the brands that they were sponsored by. And I did this all through law school. So I started shooting weddings, and I shot like 25 weddings my first year of law school. During like our study periods, I would go and travel with the surfers, and then I would come back and like take my tests. And I would ask my professors like, how do I do both? I love both. I love photography. I love like being a creative. And my professors were like very confused by me and didn't know what to tell me. So I just kept taking like small business classes, intellectual property classes. I did this senior like thesis theory thing with my intellectual property professor on Instagram and copyright issues and how there's like no real recourse if your images get stolen. So eventually I finished law school. I clerked for an appellate judge. I was hired by my dream law firm, and I realized I would have to give up photography and my small business if I were to be a full-time lawyer, because you are like turning your soul over, I feel like,
Yeah.
to life. And I didn't want that for me, like, or for my life. And I at that point had a team that I was supporting. So I ended up turning away this offer to work at like my dream law firm. And it took me about 6 months. And then I started the Artist Lawyer, which is for me the perfect marriage of my two crafts and passions. It's my passion project, so I can serve creatives and entrepreneurs and content creators and all kinds of small business owners and like support them with what I feel like I didn't have like when I was a photographer starting out. So that was a long
Totally.
backstory.
No, I love that though. I love your story because I think the aspect that so many people are confused by, maybe that some of your professors were confused by, this blend of creativity and artistry, but also passion for law. Like that's what makes you so powerful, because you're able to serve this like group of people that, like myself, and I know many other creators, are very clueless about some of these
Yeah.
things and also like very much needing that help. So I feel like you found like this perfect blend of two worlds.
Thank you. Yeah. And I feel like I see it all the time. It's so overwhelming and really like daunting and scary. Like I feel like everyone
Mm-hmm.
has so many questions, and almost it like the law, like people don't even want to think about it. They're like, I don't even want to think about it because it can be so overwhelming and daunting. And I don't know.
Exactly.
I like making it less scary for everyone.
And we very much appreciate that. So I feel like this is a really great place to dive into the first question that I had for you, which, yeah, speaking to like, it is scary. It's easy to just kind of like turn a blind eye because you don't even want to dive into it. So for people like me, content creators, people who are listening, what are some of the first steps that we can take when we kind of realize, okay, I can't just ignore this anymore. Like I
Yeah.
do need to consider, how can I protect myself when I'm starting out a content creator business? What are some of the first things you would advise thinking about?
Yeah. So I would give the same advice that I would give to any small business that's starting up. And I have a free resource on my website with like a checklist of things that you need as a small business. But the first thing I would say is to treat it like a business and to take it seriously. And if you're monetizing it and you're making money, it's time to treat it like a business and to take
Yeah.
and to take yourself seriously. I think like it just gives you so much more confidence and like legitimacy if you do in fact treat it like a business. And there's so many doors that can open from there. So some of the first things that you're going to want to do is like look into becoming an official business. So setting up an official business entity like an LLC. That's going to allow you to open up a separate business bank account so that you can keep everything very separate. And that's important for two reasons. So it's going to insulate like your personal assets from liability if something were to happen. Which, you know, being a content creator, like, I mean, we can talk about like liabilities and risks and like what there's
Mm-hmm.
probably not as much as, you know, somebody who's like going on site for things. But still, like, there's crazy people and like crazy things that happen on the internet. So
Yeah.
setting up a separate business entity is like separating you personally from your business and the liability of that. So somebody couldn't come after like your car or your house or like your investments. Um, and then also it just makes it very easy for like end of the year tax purposes and accounting to keep everything super clean, even for like your own business sake, to be able to see like what you
Mm-hmm.
brought in and what your expenses were in like a very clean and organized fashion.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be step one. You might want to look into business insurance. It's probably not going to be anything too crazy. As a content creator, I feel like I see like on average like around like $500 to $700 a year. But that's gonna like also protect your equipment if something were to happen, if it was lost or stolen or damaged. If somebody like if there was like a copyright or even like intellectual property issue and somebody put a claim in against you, you at least have your insurance to back you up. I'm trying to think what else. Let's see. Yeah. So insurance, separate business entity, and then looking into like any trademarks that you put. One, making sure you're not infringing on anyone's trademark when you're setting up your business name and that you're not using somebody else's mark, but then also protecting yours because you're investing so much into that brand name and into that business. So you want to make sure that you actually own the rights to that brand name. And then the
Mm-hmm.
last thing would be any contracts or like policies that you need to have in place. So like for you, like for example, like
Mm-hmm.
a podcast speaker agreement or a sponsorship like for your podcast agreement, terms and conditions for your website, or you know any kinds of contracts that you need to have in place, like that's probably going to be like your last and final step.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So to summarize, it's like look at opening an LLC to
Mhm.
separate yourself from your business, get business insurance, look into any potential trademarks, and then get those contracts in place. I feel like
Yep.
that's a really great checklist. So a lot of creators, I think, when considering all of these things, wonder when is the right time to start doing all of this? Because the interesting thing about being a content creator that I think differentiates it from other kind of small businesses is that you kind of almost glide your way into actually being a business owner. Like you start out very much as a hobbyist and you're just kind of say making TikToks or recording podcasts kind of for fun or just for like the love of it because you want to build a community and you're basically doing it as a volunteer. But then at some point it's like slowly maybe you start getting opportunities to make money. So there's lots of different opportunities along the way where you could say, okay, this is the time that I'm going to now take it seriously. But what would you advise? What's kind of like that signal that says like, okay, now's the time for you to like set up your LLC, for example?
Yeah. I don't know what the exact threshold is right now, but I believe like it's once you make over $800 or something like that,
Okay.
that you have to formally report everything. So I would say when you start making money, and it's not just like small money anymore, like
Mm-hmm.
within a year, like if you're making over $500 in a year from content creation, that's probably when you want to, I would just say 500 as like a minimum to look at
Sure.
it. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not just making like, you know, $20 commission here and there from like, you know, linking affiliate links
Yeah.
or whatever. You're actually like getting paid and you're making money. That's when it's time to start taking it seriously. And you might be like, oh, I only made like $1,000 or $2,000. But at that point, you're legitimately monetizing this and it's a business. So I would say even if it's small, it's time because now you're making money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's really helpful to know using that kind of maybe $500 mark as a threshold of like, okay, it's not just pennies from Amazon affiliates anymore. This is a real business. Let's set it
Yeah.
up like one.
Yeah. Because I think
Yeah.
things can snowball so quickly from there. And it's like, and then it's almost too quick. And you're like, wait, what? I should have done this. Is it too late? Should I even start? Just, and I think, you know, I have a lot of people who come to me from all different industries. And I have some people who come to me from the get go and they're like, I want to start a business. let's do everything right from the ground up. And like you said, it's really easy to just kind of slide. And I find a lot
Mm-hmm.
of creatives do that. Like they're just taking pictures of friends. Maybe they get a gift card,
Yeah.
and then it's like, when am I a business? And I really firmly believe that if you treat it like a business, you're going to open up so many more doors as well.
Yeah, totally. I 100% agree. So once all of these kind of initial steps are set up and we've sort of protected ourselves, from a legal standpoint as content creators, sometimes things can come up that you're like, okay, I've tried to put my protections in place, but now, for example, maybe I notice somebody like using some of my content without permission. Like
Mm-hmm.
maybe they've reposted a reel that I created and I like didn't tell them that they could do that. Or I've seen even more extreme examples where someone is like has taken like say an ebook that I created and now they're selling it on their own website. So these kind of things can happen online. Yeah, these are real stories that I've heard from like creator friends. So
Oh
what
gosh.
actions can we actually take, assuming that like, we've done everything that we can, to protect ourselves from the get-go? What recourse is there if somebody is stealing our content?
Yeah. And no, I just want to preface this by saying no one's immune to it, because I know my face would like,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
actually had, not even a year ago, maybe 6 months ago, another online lawyer copy my content. A
Yeah.
lawyer.
People are wild and man, they'll do anything. So
And I was
yeah,
like, you're
you
a
never know.
lawyer, and
Yeah.
she called me and apologized and whatever. But it's a story for another day, but no one's immune to it. Um,
Yeah.
the internet's like kind of the Wild West sometimes. I don't know where people think that like the rules don't apply to them, or like
Yeah.
they're going to get away with it. But yeah, it's real. So to start, I mean, I think it depends the context and how blatant it is. And like what kind of use. And you can go about things in so many different ways. So, you could like reach out to them and say, hey, this is my content. I didn't authorize this. I'm actually a big fan of just attaching an invoice. Hey, you used my content without my permission. I typically charge X for this. Because you also didn't get my prior approval to use this, there's a 20% upcharge. This invoice is like here's the link to it. Like, please make sure this is paid within 14 days. Boom. Like, and
Yeah.
chances of them paying it, like, I mean, you don't have like an agreement in place, but I'm a fan of, at least just sending that and making it really clear that this
Yeah.
is yours, you charge for it, it has a value attached to it.
Totally.
I've talked to people in the past who sometimes try to use things like this to open the door for relationships with the brand, which to me, if maybe the brand doesn't know better. It like depends on like what the brand is, but I think for the most part, like it's 2024, brands know that they shouldn't be doing this. So,
Yeah.
I feel like I see sometimes where like content creators or photographers or whoever it is, like will say like, well, I don't want them to be pissed at me because like I want to work with them at some point and I don't want to close
Yeah.
that door. But I find that if you don't establish your worth from the get-go, then they're never going to recognize your worth and value you at that. So if you let it slide and you're like, hey, you can use this for free, but like I'd love to work with you and I typically charge $500 for something like this, like they're never going to pay that.
Yeah. Because you've basically shown them, actually, I will let you use it for free. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's one avenue. Email them
Mm-hmm.
and send an invoice. You could also send a cease and desist from yourself or from a lawyer. I have a cease and desist template for copyright infringement. So if somebody's taking anything that's like an original, copyright is an original work of art. So anything like an ebook, like it could be like a PDF, it could be a video, it could be a photo, any like original creation is automatically and inherently protected by copyright. You don't have to file or register anything to have copyright protection. The second that you press the shutter or record or create something that's new and original, you automatically have copyright protection. So you can also send a cease and desist and for copyright infringement. And you could have a lawyer send it or you could send it. And then another angle that you can also take is, which I think a lot of people are not super aware of this, but TikTok, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, they all have, it's called a DMCA takedown. So it's the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. And you're able to actually, I'm sure some of you have probably done this. You can go online and cite to the original work and
Mm-hmm.
actually just have the post or whatever it is removed
Mm.
and taken
That's so
down.
helpful to know.
So yeah, so you can just have that taken down. And I just listed like 3 or 4 different avenues that you can do. Like
Mm-hmm.
you can also combine these avenues. You can send a cease and desist, send an invoice, and have it taken down. Because
Yep.
I think I touched on this when we met at when I did my presentation at Condo.
Mm-hmm.
The second that a brand uses your content and that it's been seen, if you're getting it taken down 24 hours later, they've already derived most of the value out of it. So they've
Yeah.
gotten like what they needed out of it. If you have it taken down, they probably don't care, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Because they already got the exposure. They got, that awareness in that amount of time for
Yeah.
sure.
So my original theory, which maybe at some point I need to actually pursue this, was to have some sort of like fine or damages attached to copyright infringement so that when you have these things taken down, you could be penalized in correlation with how many like followers the brand has or like how big the audience size is that it was exposed to, because they've already derived that value. So I would still probably send an invoice depending on like, of course, everything depends on the context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's such a helpful process to understand. I feel like a lot of people don't know about the DMCA takedown like option to be able to
Yeah.
just like literally go online yourself and say, this is a copy of this thing that I posted, please have it taken down. And I love your point of like, just send the invoice, because at the end of the day, at least it makes the point that the work that I've done has value, like there
Yeah.
is a monetary value to it. And, you can't just post it for free. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good message to send at the very least.
And don't be afraid to contact an attorney. I mean, I see litigation where I don't do litigation, but I see it come through where people well, you use somebody's photo without their permission and they're suing you for $20,000. So
Yeah.
don't be afraid. Like, I know we're the little guy as like the creatives and the artists, but don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and your work, because there's value behind it and you deserve to be paid for it.
Totally. Totally. And on that note of deserving to be paid, another question that I got was kind of on a similar note in terms of like people, in this case, it's people not respecting copyright. Something that also happens often for creators is brands not necessarily respecting contract terms. This is something
Yeah.
that's happened to me on many occasions. And
Really?
I've heard from many of my creator friends of the biggest thing is like brands not paying on time. Just
Mm,
seems to be like the most common struggle. And I've kind of landed on my own personal process for how I deal with that, or like how I try to like get paid if it's,
yeah.
if it seems like they don't have intention to do so. But I'm curious from like an expert's perspective, what would you advise a content creator do if we're in a position where it's like, this was due, like it was supposed to be paid 30 days after the invoice was sent. It's now 60 days later and I'm
Yeah.
still not paid. Like
Yeah.
what can I do?
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
I'm curious. So are the brands presenting these contracts to you
So
at the time?
I've had both scenarios
Okay.
where it's a brand contract. In my kind of like worst example where this has happened to me, it was my own contract, which I had like purchased the template online, and so like I had set the terms and of like when things needed to be paid and whatever. um so yeah, in my case where it was like I don't know, it was like 100 days or something
Yeah.
overdue by the time I got paid. It was my own contract.
Wow. So, what I personally like to do and what I would recommend, if at all possible, and this is something you can keep in mind when you're reviewing contracts that you're also presented with, I think, especially as content creators, this is probably the biggest thing that you're going to deal with, like when it comes to contracts. And so, something that I would encourage you to have in your contracts or request to be inserted prior to signing are late fees.
Mm-hmm.
So, when something is late, those late fees start accruing on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis. Like 3% daily is going to accrue on each day that it's past due. So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to incentivize the company to pay this invoice sooner. I would also personally have within like your contracts, or, it's going to be a process to try to like request all of this and have it inserted
Mm-hmm.
into the company's contract if they're presenting it to you. But that if you have to pursue payment, then they're responsible for like any costs in you pursuing that, like any attorney's fees, any filing fees. You can send them to collections for it. So that gives you other avenues and other ways to like pressure and make sure, and also insulate you from like being at the expense of covering those requests. Like if you did have to loop an
Mm-hmm.
attorney in, well, now you can say late fees and my attorney's fees are also due. You can also like use that to kind of leverage and threaten, like, hey, we're now 60 days past due. I've already added late
Mm-hmm.
fees on. I'm going to loop an attorney in. Per the contract, you're going to also be responsible for these fees now. In addition, under the contract, I have the ability to send you to collections for this. So you can kind of like use it to leverage, but then also use it to make sure that you're not at a loss, and you do have these other avenues to pursue the payment that you're owed under the contract.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the leverage piece is so significant because in my experience, like thankfully there's only been one time in my like career as an entrepreneur where I actually did have to get a lawyer involved in order to like get paid from a client years ago. But in most of the cases, like with brands not paying, all I have to do is like threaten legal action. And then all of a sudden they're enthusiastic about paying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like even just not being afraid to say like, you know what, like I will get my lawyer involved if you, don't, take action or whatever. That seems to inspire action for
Yep.
people.
Yeah, and sometimes that's all you need. And I think that circles back to taking your business legitimately, because I think a lot of brands probably, I would assume, take advantage of this. You're a content creator and maybe you don't treat it like a business. And the second that like your tone changes, your emails change, that you treat it like a business, maybe you have an assistant or like a VA that sends these emails on your behalf. I'm also a huge fan of having an alter ego that's really you. And just
Yeah.
like another like assistant at katiesteckley.com or whatever. And like maybe you're really sending it, but you're signing it like Rebecca, and you can be a little bit more like, hey, your invoice was due. Like I'm the accounts receivable. You can, and then you're not maybe tarnishing like your relationship with that brand too, if that's something that you're worried about.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really great tip. It kind of also just helps a lot of creators, or like at least I know myself, like I am very much a people pleaser. I want people to like me. So I hate
Yeah.
having to be, a little bit more. I'm just kind of conflict averse. So I love the idea of like having that alter ego that can be like that sassy version of yourself that's not allowed, that like feels more allowed to say,
Yeah.
invoices due, like please,
Yeah.
please advise or whatever, and just be
Yeah.
like very blunt.
Yeah. Exactly. Utilize
Yeah.
that. They don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So, further along the lines of the of brand deals, because this is like probably the primary, revenue stream for most creators, and it's also where we have the most contact with things like, contracts, legal agreements, that kind of thing. What would you kind of advise content creators should look out for when we're reviewing contracts? I know probably in an ideal world, we would have a lawyer look at it on our behalf, but for
Yeah.
a lot of creators who are just starting out, that's probably not within their, budget or whatever. So do you have any quick tips of like, okay, here are the things that you should keep an eye out for before you sign your life away to a brand?
Yeah. So, and this is interesting because what my cousin is a huge TikToker. So I always review, she has millions of I don't know how it's crazy. It's super cool. I
That's
think
awesome.
I sent you her page before. So I have like reviewed her agency agreements before and like brand contracts. Um, so on like realistically, like exclusivity, are they requiring you to be exclusive to them? Like, are they barring what agreements or like relationships you can enter into with like other like similar types of brands? That's something to look for. What termination looks like, um, who can terminate. Let me think. What else? who owns the copyright? So are you turning everything over to them? Do they own everything, or do they have the ability to repost it, to reshare it, to reutilize it? Like, where is it getting shared? What kind of use do they have? What else? Yeah, those are a
Yeah.
few good like key pieces to look for.
Totally. Yeah. And in my experience, a lot of times, like, brands will just put these things into the contract by default because, of course, like, if you're the one preparing the contract, you're going to like write it in your own favor. I
Yeah.
totally understand that. But a lot of creators don't necessarily know that it's going to be included. And then, unless you really look into it, you might be surprised to learn, like, oh, this like YouTube video that I made is now owned in like perpetuity by this brand, because a lot of times these things aren't even discussed in the initial email exchange necessarily. It's just like, oh, well, here's the contract from legal. So
Yeah.
it's definitely good to look out for.
Right. Some other things, I'm just looking at one of my contract templates to see if there's anything
Yeah.
I missed. So what like disclosures they require, because that's going to inform
Mhm.
you what you have to like tag or disclose. If they require approval over the content before you post or share
Mhm.
it.
Speaking of disclosures, I actually have like kind of an interesting thing I'd love your opinion on. This is
Yeah.
something I just heard through the creator grapevine lately. A friend of mine was talking about a brand who reached out to her that had like specifically requested that it like that the ad would not be disclosed. So to not like put the paid partnership agreement, or you know what I mean, flag on it or whatever on Instagram. Um what's your take on that? Like I personally feel like that's tea. Brands are out here asking creators to lie about the fact that it's an ad. Like I'm curious
Yeah.
what are the legal repercussions of that if someone were to be found like not properly disclosing an ad?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge risk on the person posting it because you're legally required to post those
Yeah.
disclaimers. So that could result in like your account getting banned or taken down, or like you getting in trouble. And then like you're signing that you're okay with that. That's a huge risk and liability that you're taking on. If you would want that to be, in my opinion, so worth the risk, I would be like 200% upcharge if you want me to do that, because that's a huge risk that I'm taking, if you're even comfortable with taking that risk, because
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise that you violate those rules and regulations. But if that's something like, and if you, I mean, I wouldn't do it because there's astronomical, like you can be like astronomically penalized for that. And like you're blatantly aware that you're doing it when you're signing in the contract that you're agreeing to it. So there's no way out of that. Like you're just
Yeah.
screwed. But like, I don't know. If you want
Yeah.
to take that risk, I would be like, that's an extra 200K for you.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. I think a lot of creators need to recognize the significance of like disclosures, and like it's not just, a little like throwaway tag on an Instagram post. It is like legally required. And like you're mentioning, like it is a huge risk to take on yourself to not disclose it, not only legally, but also in my opinion, with the trust between creator and audience. Because if I were following a creator and I found out they were like doing all these ads that were not disclosed and they were like being sketchy about it, that would lose my trust, right? So I feel like it's like a big significant thing. And if I were to see a brand saying, okay, we'll do a deal with you, but you like can't disclose it, I would run the other way. Like that's a big
Yeah.
red flag to me.
Totally. And that's a red flag. Like, how ethical that company is. Do you really want to be associated with them? Are they going to pay you? Like, if they're
Yeah.
doing other things unethically, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Beware.
Exactly. Totally. So moving on from brand partnerships, another huge theme that I got tons of questions about from the listeners is, could you explain to us like what is fair use? I feel like in the social media landscape there's so many opportunities to use media assets like created by other people, whether it's like literally just a GIF sticker inside the Instagram stories,
Yeah.
editor, even like some CapCut templates that will use like a clip from a movie. And then obviously on TikTok and Instagram, we have the opportunity all the time to add copyright music to our reels. So could you just explain a little bit like what should we be aware of as a content creator in terms of like what's allowed, what's not, or maybe what's like the spectrum of risk in using some of these things?
Yeah. So generally, fair use is for the purpose of comment, criticism, research, teaching, and scholarship. So like super boiled down, education, like it's like an educational purpose, or it's like commentary or criticism. So like you're being like satirical or like you're completely like altering the use and transforming something that's copyrighted. Um, for one of these purposes. So generally speaking, like a GIF in a comment, like that's going to be fine. Where you want to be careful. And like another thing, so like I know you brought up like celebrities, you have to also be careful of like so celebrities and everybody has the rights to publicity, which is like how your image and your likeness, even like how your voice is used. If you're especially like if you're a celebrity or like distinguishable, like if your voice is or your looks. So like all the time I feel like celebrities will be photographed like coming out of a store like with like a bag after shopping with that at that store, or like eating at that restaurant, and then that restaurant posts that like paparazzi photo, and technically those celebrities have a right to control how their likeness is associated and who it's associated with. So brands have to be aware of that. Like if you like, just because a celebrity shopped at your store, that doesn't mean that they're publicly endorsing you. They might have like an exclusive relationship with a competitor and then you're resharing it. So that's something that you have to be aware of, because you could get in trouble for that. And then when it comes to like generally speaking for content creators, you definitely have to be aware of other other things that are copyrighted. So making sure that you have like proper licensing or like ability to use songs. Like you can't just use whatever song you want, especially if it's like a commercial purpose and you're making money.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's all different like ways to properly like license or get music for videos that you're making, or like there's the proper ways to utilize them. When it comes to images, like you have to be so careful using images that you don't have, like you can't just pull any image off of anywhere and just use it for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because that photographer has a copyright and they could just sue you for copyright infringement, especially if it's monetized and you're like making money off of the post or the reel or whatever it is. So you have to be so careful, and make sure that you're properly like going through the right channels to like license or utilize these images. So like go online and use some of these, places where you can properly like license and download photos. Don't just like grab anyone's photo from anywhere. Like make sure that you have the rights and the ability to use things properly, so you
Mm-hmm.
don't get flagged with these things. Because it's more than just your reel or your TikTok being taken down. Like somebody could not only send you a cease and desist, but they could just come, like
Mm-hmm.
we were saying, invoice you, or just I have an email in my inbox right now of someone who's being sued for $20,000 for using a photo as an example image of a location that they were going to be shooting at, and they were like, this is
Yeah.
where we'll be shooting, and it's a landscape image and it's somebody else's photo, and they're being sued for $20,000, and they have
Yeah.
thousands of dollars to defend themselves, and they just are flat out like wrong.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I feel like with all of this stuff in the online, like in the social media landscape in particular, at least this is my take on it, and you can kind of tell me your thoughts. Like there definitely are like cut and dry rules of like, you know what, you're not allowed to use someone else's content that they have copyright for, but then it also seems to me that there is a bit of like a spectrum of risk in a sense of like, okay, so yeah, it's not allowed, but like clearly lots of people are still doing it. And it's sort of like, at what moment does it actually turn into something that could, like, that somebody would like sue you for. So like, for example, all the time we see memes of like, let's say there was like a moment at like the Oscars or like some other celebrity event, and it's like two celebrities interacting, and then everybody will like take that image and they'll like label it with like, oh, me and
Yes.
my bestie or whatever. And we see that again and again. And my sort of impression is that, okay, well, technically it's not allowed to actually use that image and like reproduce it. The owner of that copyright likely isn't going to actually go after everybody for it. So do you think that's like true, or am I like missing a part of it where, you are taking on some risk, but maybe in some situations it's less because
Yeah.
of like the context?
I would say memes, like that is different in general because
Okay.
memes are like commentary and criticism. So you're transforming
Okay,
the
sure.
truth and you're kind of being like satirical, like critical, like using it to make some sort of like commentary. So that to me would be protected under fair use. Like
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
but I do think like so I will see all the time like people will create like they'll use like for example like Disney logos or like to sell things on Etsy or
Okay, sure. Yeah.
and that's where you want to be really careful if you're like selling something or using it to sell something and it's somebody's like brand mark and you don't like oh that's where you of course would want to be really really careful as well with like trademarks, brand marks, things that are like brand identifiers.
Mhm.
So I mean I feel like I see it on like Instagram and TikTok all the time where like right now like so many people are selling like Tortured Poets Department sweatshirts.
Yeah.
I'm like, she has a trademark for all this. Like, why are you doing
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So it's kind of like the fair use part comes into play if you are providing your own like creative interpretation on it, commentary, satire, like you mentioned. So memes would fall under that. In terms of like use of music, I think a lot of people get confused about. So on Instagram and TikTok and Shorts as well, we like the app gives us the option to add music to it, right? And
Yeah,
so my understanding is like Instagram or TikTok, like they've worked out agreements with the copyright holders to allow users to include that music. And my impression is like, that is sort of, that's allowed. Like the apps are letting
yeah,
us do that. But where it becomes an issue is if I do like a brand deal, for example, I can't just like add that music to a brand deal because now I'm doing this for commercial purposes. So I'm curious your take on that
hmm
because I feel like again that's maybe a potential for gray area of like, one could argue all of the content I post on Instagram is for commercial purposes because it allows me to grow my audience, which then allows me to like make affiliate sales, eventually gain more brand deals.
yeah.
So, yeah, what would you say to that? Like, do creators need to be concerned about, using the trending audios on Instagram, for example, in content that is not explicitly a brand deal?
That's so interesting. I have not come across that. Um, so I would definitely want to research this a little bit more to know more. But you're right in that there is like a licensing fee worked out and I think we all kind of saw that when a ton of music was taken off of TikTok. So when you can add the actual sound from the app that you're using, you're gonna be in a better place than like uploading that same song and not using like the app provided music. um have you run into that with
No, personally, I've never had any issues with it. It's just something that I've always wondered about. And I know other like creators do as well, because it is this interesting balance where we're given this permission to use copyrighted music, but then I do think we fall into this interesting area where content that's not like explicitly, monetized, it still kind of does contribute to the growth of our business, our ability to monetize other content. So it's just something that I've been curious about.
yeah. And I think that's like what we're just kind of talking about too, where it's like, how much risk do you want to take on and how much risk is there? Everything's kind of like a risk reward analysis. And so, is somebody going to come down to all these content creators and say like, you can't use this music? That it's probably also in the best interest of the artist for people to be using this music online and like they want it to be trending. And then of course you're getting into a different territory if you're commercializing it and monetizing. So that's where it probably gets a little less
Yeah.
gray. But it's like, how much risk is there really in,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I wouldn't worry about,
Yeah.
you know.
Totally. And I think with so much of this stuff, it is that risk reward kind of analysis and understanding that, like, sometimes by posting, say, for example, posting a reel, using an artist's music, that you've actually selected it through Instagram, whatever, that provides benefit to them actually. And they would probably see that as a benefit rather than, oh, like I want to take down this content creator because they're getting benefit from using my audio. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship that way. So particularly in that area, I can see like, it's not that big of a risk.
Totally.
Cool. So, okay, I really appreciate all the time that you've taken to share all of this advice with us, Maggie. I want to make sure that everyone who's listening knows where they can find out more from you, and particularly all of the templates that you have to offer, because I actually think this is a game changer and so many content creators don't know about this, that like if you're unsure about like you mentioned before, like brand partnership agreements, podcast guest agreements, privacy policies, all these different things, this is something you can help with. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So you can find me at The Artist Lawyer. My name's Maggie Fisher. So I have my personal Instagram, then I link to The Artist Lawyer. We do a ton of like free resources. Our newsletter is always super, like really good content. We're always trying to provide really like helpful, educational, current things on our newsletter. So I would definitely say like check out our free resources on theartistlawyer.com and on Instagram. And I'm always personally commenting on things that are going on, like in, whatever's current and happening. So, I'm sure you will tag or drop my Instagram, but it's Maggie Fisher and The Artist Lawyer.
Yes, all of that will definitely be linked in the description and in the show notes. And to close us out, I'm just curious, do you have any kind of final words of wisdom or advice for content creators who are just kind of starting to dip their toes into this legal realm and want to be responsible and protect their brand and their small business? What would you leave us with?
Yeah. So I think just circling back to what we said in the very beginning, I think it's really scary. It's really daunting, but I think if you can just dive into it, don't be afraid to take ownership over this part of your business. I know it's like going to the dentist. Nobody wants to like go to the lawyer or go to the legal side of, their business, but I think it will give you so much more confidence. It'll make you look so much more legit. You will just feel better having an understanding of your business and taking it more seriously. And I always like to encourage people to like, there's so many resources online where you can find information. Make sure that you're going like to a lawyer, like somebody like me. There's other people like me out there on the internet. So don't get your legal information from TikTok. Don't just go to like Reddit threads. Go to a lawyer. I'm always happy. Like I get requests all the time to answer questions. So like I will make content out of it as well, or I will answer your question. But make sure you're going to like a legitimate resource for your contract templates. Lawyers are held to a higher ethical standard than like buying a template off of like Etsy or Creative Market. So just make sure you're going to like a very legitimate resource and don't be afraid to like reach out for help.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing all of your expertise and advice with us today. It's been awesome chatting with you. And everybody listening, check the description, check the show notes. We're going to have links to everything so you can check out The Artist Lawyer. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This was so fun.
Another huge thank you to Maggie for taking some time to share her legal advice and expertise with us today. It was super insightful. And of course, remember, if you want to check in on all of your social media metrics from across platforms using beautiful visual customizable dashboards, you can try a 14-day trial of Dash Hudson when you go to dashhudson.com/creator club. It's my absolute favorite social media metrics platform. So make sure you check that out. That's dashhudson.com/creator club. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. If you appreciate this interview format, if you think you would find it helpful for me to interview other experts about different aspects of creator business, maybe like an accountant, for example, let me know. You can always reach out to us at Creator Club Podcast on Instagram, or you can just DM my personal Instagram as well at Katie Steckley. I always love to hear from you, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye.